So in this module, we're going to be looking at learning and growth. And we begin with a simple but very old question. What makes a happy life? Let's go back to the ancient world and to see how this question was once answered. In the archaic age of Greece, a happy life was one that did not end in disaster. So this man here, King Croesus of Lydia, the richest, one of the most powerful men in the entire ancient world, lived with huge family, great wealth, great power, and then unwisely, toward the end of his life, declared war on the Persians and lost that war in great disaster and embarrassment. And this time in history, the unknowability of the future and the caprice of the gods meant that life could go from being happy to catastrophic. And so Solon, a great poet and statesman of Athens, said this: "Count no man happy until his end is known." As we move into the classical age, where we get the beginnings of Western philosophy as we've come to know it, you had different answers to this question about happiness. Epicurus, for example, in his school, founded in Athens in the 4th century BC, for him, a happy life was one that was full of hedone. Hedone is the Greek word for pleasure. Now, by pleasure, he didn't mean lots of fancy food and luxurious parties. For the Epicureans, the most pleasant life is one with simple joys and simple pleasures, where you don't worry about death, you don't worry about politics and fame and wealth. You enjoy simple things deeply. That was what the Epicureans thought of a happy life. The Stoics, on the other hand, maybe the most famous school in the ancient Mediterranean, for them, the randomness and suffering of life required us to be detached from the things of the world, and that the best way to live a happy life was to seek what they called ataraxia, a state of non-disturbance, where you were totally removed from the kinds of disasters that could happen to you because you know that they could only affect your physical body, whereas your soul, your virtue, could never be touched, even by the worst kind of disaster. So this is the state of non-disturbance that the Stoics thought made someone perfectly happy. A third way of looking at this question, what is a happy life, comes from this man, Aristotle, who was born to a family of doctors in the provinces of northern Greece, then called Macedonia, and came to Athens to study with Plato. And Aristotle was a very gifted biologist. And he, looking at all the different kinds of living things in the world, said everything in nature seems to have some kind of blueprint, some kind of goal, what he called a telos, its final destination, its realization of its full potential. So the telos of a seed, of an oak seed, would be the oak tree, tall oak tree with the billowing branches and leaves. And this telos, for all living things, plants, animals, human beings, this telos is present inside the organism from the very beginning, a kind of blueprint or roadmap for the growth of which that thing is capable. And it doesn't mean that just having a telos means that we can realize it, because living things need certain things to develop their capacities. So Aristotle put human beings as a living creature in the natural world, and like all other creatures in nature, Aristotle says, humans have a telos. So what is our telos? What makes us different from an oak tree or a school of fish? Well, Aristotle says that among all animals, the special capacities of humans are for reasoning and language. And the fact that we can reason and communicate through our language permits us to make moral choices and to explain them to others. And so of all animals, says Aristotle, we are the zoon politikon, meaning the animal of the polis, the animal that likes to make cities and communities. And so because this is the kind of creature we are, we use our capacities most fully in communities, when we act morally, correctly, virtuously, bravely, logically, empathetically, on behalf of the community. And so when we develop these capacities that all human beings have, this is how we achieve what Aristotle calls eudaimonia, or to put it another way, a flourishing of the soul. So he says, here's how we develop ourselves towards eudaimonia, which is the telos of human beings. Well, first, we need to set the right intentions. That small actions over time become habits of virtue. So, for example, if you are naturally argumentative, you might just think to add, oh, well, I may be wrong about this. And just adding that over time can lead to becoming more humble. Aristotle also says our choice of friends is critically important, as our friends will help us practice these virtues and unfold our personalities or not. And Aristotle finally says that we have to keep revising our opinions, keep that learning about the world never finishes because the world is always changing. So we have to keep revising our opinions based on new information from the world around us. Eudaimonia is not a state of being for Aristotle, but a process of becoming. For Aristotle, the greatest pleasure in life is when we can experience the development of these special capacities that we have as parents, as friends, artists, soldiers, citizens, and watch these capacities go to work. And that this might require outside help. We need to have a certain amount of health, safety, education, the support of friends. In this case, Aristotle was very different in his outlook than the Stoics, who thought we could achieve perfect virtue without any kind of external help. Aristotle says, no, we need to have a certain amount of health and safety and education and friendship in order for us to grow as humans. And so eudaimonia, Aristotle's idea of the happy life, we can think of as soul happiness, the flourishing of our souls. And this is not a destination, but a feeling of growing towards our full potential. Now, if we flash forward to what does contemporary science and psychology tell us about a happy life? Well, these are two professors, psychologists at Harvard, Robert Kegan and Lisa Leahy, and their book, In Every One Culture, is a very influential and interesting book about how we can individually and collectively continue learning and growing through life. It is based in what they call the science of adult development, which studies the gradual evolution of how people make meaning and how they develop their psychological capacities. In the last 30 years, Kagan and Leahy have studied how to apply these principles of adult development to making teams and organizations more collectively intelligent. The science of child development took shape in the early 20th century. Theorists such as Jean Piaget and Lev Vygotsky identified a series of developmental stages through which children normally pass. And the conventional view for much of the 20th century was that the kinds of psychological growth we needed to be happy was basically done by the end of our adolescence. That by, let's say, 20 years old, our psychological growth, like our physical growth, was essentially complete. This was the conventional wisdom until fairly recently. And since the 1980s, a set of new studies has shed light on how people grow all through their lives. And we've learned, neuroscience has revealed about how the brain keeps adapting through what they call neuroplasticity, that parts of our brain can be reassigned and can grow and can reconnect and make new connections until the very end of life. That within any age group, there's a large variability. So that just being 30 years old doesn't mean you've achieved a certain level of maturity. You can have very mature 30-year-olds and very immature 30-year-olds. And what they mean by rising mental complexity is if we're growing psychologically, we're taking greater responsibility for our own thoughts and feelings. we're able to integrate more layers of information, including information that might seem paradoxical. And we're able to get out of just the here and now, satisfying our needs here and now, and thinking more about the future. So this is what Keegan and Leahy mean by rising mental complexity. So how do we grow as adults? Well, the first thing they propose is that, based on these studies, there are qualitatively distinct levels of mental complexity. These levels are very different one from the next, and we can identify what stage somebody's in by asking them certain questions. And usually what they've found is that there are periods of stability for several years in our adult lives, and then some period of change, some experience disrupts how we think and either for the good or for the bad, and propels us into another form of psychological ability. And that this happens less and less frequently as time passes, that it's harder for these changes to take place the older we get, but it's still possible. But that fewer and fewer people are able to reach the highest levels of what they call mental complexity. So we're going to pick this up in the next video with a story.